And so I stopped, and I'm so glad I quit because I had a monkey on.
Ashton Kutcher.
And the great thing is, while you're reading the book, you get to smoke. Like, he tells you when to light up. He's like, all right, light one now. And you're like, well, wait, absolutely.
That part's a big selling point.
He insists that you keep smoking while you're reading the book. And then when you finish it, you stop.
My method is known as Easy Way.
This is Alan Carr, recorded back in 2005.
And it will enable any smoker to quit immediately, permanently, and actually enjoy the process. Before you dismiss my claims, bear in mind that I've been proving them for over 20 years. That's why my book and global network of clinics are so successful.
This book is the only thing that's ever given me a shred of hopefulness about stopping smoking.
Yeah, we can.
Like, it literally always felt impossible in the past. And now here's this guy saying that not only would I...
To an automatic voice
do it, but actually be happy about it. That's the true measure of success, Alan Carr says. Not just stopping, but becoming a happy non-smoker. I couldn't imagine being happy not smoking. I couldn't imagine that a bunch of words could get someone to stop feeling an incredibly strong urge. That words alone could make something that seems so impossible actually happen. What type of witchery was afoot here in this book? And all the stories in today's show are about that. People kind of casting spells to try to make people completely change their directions in life in some way. Oh, and you get to listen to me try to quit smoking. Stay with us. Act 1, The Straw That Broke Joe Camel's Back. We're actually not sure about that title. There's a couple of others here that we like. Act 1, Can I Still Be a Joker and a Midnight Toker? Or this one, Act 1, The Unbearable Lighterlessness of Being. Anyway, the book's relatively short and really, really repetitive. He says you have to follow every instruction to the letter. And the way it works, Carr says most people who try to convince you not to smoke will tell you the reasons you shouldn't. Health risks, all the money you spend, whatever. But he says smokers already know all of that. If any of that actually worked, Alan Carr says, you'd have quit by now. No, what he does instead is the opposite. He names all of the reasons you give for smoking, all the things you like about it or think it's offering you, and he carefully explains why every one of those reasons is bogus. He describes it as a kind of deprogramming, ultimately removing any desire for a cigarette. And a lot of the precepts make a lot of sense. For instance, he says smokers believe that smoking helps them focus and concentrate, but he says they're just kidding themselves. That's just an illusion. All smoking does is remove the distraction of nicotine withdrawal, so you only think it's helping you think better. There are tons of fallacies like that, he says, and smokers perpetuate them without even realizing it. This is from the book. He says, smokers claim that the cigarette relaxes them and helps them to handle stressful situations, but they also claim that it helps them get going in the morning and that it gives them a boost. How can a drug that relaxes you or relieves stress also stimulate you? This contradiction illustrates the truth about smoking. The cigarette just doesn't do any of the things we tell ourselves it does. I should say he distinguishes Easy Way from just going cold turkey, or what he calls the willpower method. Those poor souls aren't real non-smokers, he says. They're just smokers who aren't letting themselves smoke. What kind of life is that? Whereas if you have no desire to smoke anymore, you don't need willpower. You also won't be irritable, or depressed, or gain weight, or any of the things that, according to most people, make quitting hard. Also, the reported success rate for willpower alone is really low. It depends on who you ask, but it might be as low as 3 to 5%. Cutting down doesn't work, Alan Carr says, because it just makes every cigarette seem that much more precious. It's why he says to just smoke as you normally would while you read the book. Also, he really wants you to sit with it. How's the taste? What's it really feel like going down into your lungs? And don't even get him started on nicotine replacement therapy. Patches, gum, all that stuff. That's just going to keep you wanting cigarettes. You get into arguments on this point, like this one on Sky TV with someone from a smoking cessation charity.
It's not nicotine replacement therapy, it's nicotine maintenance. You're actually giving them nicotine, the drug they're addicted to. And that keeps their body craving nicotine. It's absolute nonsense.
You are giving them nicotine, but it's stepping them down gradually so that they can come off it.
Can you tell me the proved rates of success on nicotine replacement?
It's much greater than
That's what the adverts say. It's 4 times greater. 4 times greater than what?
4 times greater than just using willpower alone.
But willpower doesn't work.
No,
so it's
it
4
doesn't.
times greater than nothing.
Well, and if you...
Alan Carr never had any training in psychology or medicine. He says one day he just realized what a con smoking is. Took things from there. Started working with individual clients in the early 80s, and group seminars, and the book, and ultimately an organization that operates in more than 50 countries around the world. For my money, his cred was even better than that of a therapist or a psychiatrist. He was a smoker, for about as long as I was, and much heavier. Sometimes 100 cigarettes a day. He had tried to quit a lot of times before hitting upon his method, at which point he just stopped on a dime. If only he'd figured it out way sooner. Alan Carr died of lung cancer in 2006. He hadn't been a smoker for about 20 years. I felt this growing excitement as I read the book. I was starting to beat out my fear of quitting. At one point I wrote in a notebook, Alan Carr is right about the taste. It's foul. The smoke felt bad going down my lungs. I think my thinking about smoking has genuinely changed. The night before my final day of smoking, I felt like a kid on Christmas Eve, sort of thrilled and wishing the day would just hurry up and get here already. Alan Carr said this might happen. The next night, December 27th, I smoked my final cigarette.
Yeah.
Sort of a ritual built into the process.
Copyright?
For some reason, I wanted to be outside, walking the
So
neighborhood.
you're allowed to
I
include it in
smoked it maybe
videos?
faster than any cigarette ever. Knocked the burning ember off the butt, threw it in somebody's trash
So you don't
can,
have to pay
and
money
said
to listen to it?
out loud,
No.
"Goodbye,
What,
cigarettes."
the service? You
And
don't have to pay money
when I
for
woke
the
up the next
service?
day,
No.
It's not copyright.
I wanted a cigarette more than I ever remember wanting one first thing in the morning. Which is not what the book says is supposed to happen. I don't know what I did or didn't do or what exactly went wrong, but suddenly the way felt anything but easy. In the book, over and over again, Alan Carr says some version of the actual physical withdrawal from nicotine is a very mild, slightly empty, insecure feeling. It's so mild that most smokers don't even notice it throughout their smoking lives. I've also heard that the physical withdrawal only lasts 3 days. Or is it a week? Or is it 3 weeks? And after that, it's merely psychological. I've heard the individual cravings last anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, and then they pass. All I can say is, in my experience, all of this is utter horseshit. I don't even understand the concept of individual cravings. In my case, withdrawal has meant a constant, crazed yearning that varies in tolerability throughout the day. This is how I described it a couple of weeks in. It's like a worldwide itch. Like all of my limbs are phantom limbs. Like I swallowed a live animal much larger than me that promptly died, and now I have to walk around with it inside of me, soul and all. Or it's like opening all these awful little packages in which there's something I can't see that painfully stings me, and there's no telling how many more I have to open, nor for how long. It is the thing I'm thinking about more than any other thing, and more than all of the other things. This was on January 13th. Okay, I've had a bunch of snacks, and nothing makes it better. Like, literally nothing makes it better. Everything that I do instead of smoking makes me want to smoke more. This is the worst day of the non-smoking that there's been so far. What is it? We're now going into day 17. I don't fucking know. I don't know. Like, they're hard. They're all hard. The thing about thinking something's going to be easy is that when it's ultimately not, it makes it that much harder. Like, yeah, if I can't do it, I must be an idiot. And thinking back on some of the passages in the book, I felt gaslit. Like my lived experience was being questioned. This is Alan Carr on a British talk show sometime in the early aughts.
We talk about these terrible withdrawal bangs. You say to somebody, well, where did it hurt you? Where? Show me.
I can say exactly where. January 18th, so like 3 weeks in, I had this attack. I was on the corner in my neighborhood trying to decide whether to go home or go to the bar. I chose the bar, and my brain was like, oh, we're walking about. It's time for a cigarette, huh? And I said, no, we don't do that anymore. And my brain was like, what do you mean? It's time for a cigarette. And I said, no,
Like, that looks
it's
better
not.
now.
And then it's like I was
Trees in front
physically
up, it looks
punched in
better.
the solar plexus with something electric that sent a shock up through my face and head. I screamed. It's crazy. I just literally like turned to walk in the other direction. I just went, fuck! Like, fuck! Oh my fucking god.
Can you turn down a little bit?
Well, it better get better at some point. It got worse. I've gained weight, been drinking more. I went a month with no nicotine at all, and then gave in and started having a nicotine lozenge here and there. I have about 2 a day now, which naturally made me relitigate everything Alan Carr had said.
Is it a woman
It
or
also
a
made me
man
wonder,
talking?
like, why
Man.
wasn't this working for me if it works for so many people? So I started looking for answers, and I stumbled across this podcast that was way more revelatory to me about my addiction than anything in the book.
Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life.
You might be familiar with Andrew Huberman. He's kind of a neuroscience rock star now. He has a lab at Stanford School of Medicine where he researches neurobiology and ophthalmology. But apart from that, he's made it a personal mission to explain how your brain and body work so you can maybe make better choices. And he has an episode on nicotine, which made me feel like someone had put their hand on my shoulder, looked me in the eye, and said, you, sir, are not insane. Again, Alan Carr's central premise is that all the things smokers like about smoking, it relaxes us, it focuses us, it gives us a boost. Carr says that the only thing we're feeling is just the withdrawal going away. But according to Huberman, that's not true at all. Scientists have been studying the brain chemistry of this for years, decades, and just to be super abbreviated about it here, the podcast is 2 hours long. Nicotine juices up your brain with these 3 chemicals. Dopamine, you've heard of dopamine. People think it causes pleasure, but it's also the thing that makes you want pleasure. It motivates you, makes you strive, pursue. Acetylcholine, which I had never heard of, helps you focus, come up with ideas. Plus, this is weird, you have acetylcholine receptors on your muscles too, which Huberman says could explain why some people feel more physically relaxed on nicotine. And then epinephrine, which you could just call adrenaline. So when Alan Carr says the nicotine itself doesn't give you a boost, it gives you a boost. And when you put all of that together,
We now have a very clear picture. Reward pathways are turned. Attention is turned. Alertness is turned. You feel better than you felt a few minutes ago. Your blood pressure is up. Your heart rate is up. Your preparedness for thinking is elevated as well. And yet your body is somewhat relaxed. That's a very interesting state of mind and body. Interesting because it's somewhat ideal for cognitive work. If you're going to sit down and work on a book, or you're going to sit down and try and figure out a hard math problem, or you're going to write a letter that's really challenging for you to write, or maybe that you're really excited to write, but that you've been, slow to get out the door for whatever reason. Here I'm talking about my own habits of procrastination. That state of being very alert, but your body being relaxed, is almost, if not the optimal state for getting mental work done. We're talking about one molecule, nicotine, found in plants like tomatoes and potatoes and the tobacco plant. One molecule that can trigger activation of all the circuits for focus and motivation in one fell swoop. That is remarkable.
when I got in touch with Huberman and we sat down for
What
a
are those
conversation,
green things?
he said this stuff was obvious to him the first time he smoked a cigarette.
Separate.
He was 14. Same time he had his first cup of black coffee.
I thought that was about as good as it gets until I took my first drag off a cigarette. And then I realized, wow. Nicotine just makes everything look a little different. You feel focused and relaxed. I mean, that's a very hard combo for most people to just drop themselves into.
Unfortunately, nicotine also has a lot of harmful side effects. It constricts blood flow, it causes heart problems. And just to say, the whole second half of the podcast is about how incredibly bad tobacco is for you. Huberman doesn't smoke anymore or use any kind of nicotine. I ran him through some of Alan Carr's claims about nicotine, and he did give me his take on them, although warily.
I have to be careful because I don't want to discourage anyone from using a resource like this book that could help them move away from a unhealthy practice.
Sure.
So I don't want to undermine his efforts, because I think that the effort is a noble and important one. But
he says Alan Carr's right that you can get so dependent on nicotine that you don't derive any benefit anymore. Just smoke so you can feel normal. That can happen with any addictive drug. But he says there are tons of studies supporting the idea that nicotine helps with focus. And no, it doesn't curb your stress, but it might make you better able to handle stress because you're more keyed up and vigilant. So if the central premise of the book is flawed, and nicotine can do all of these enjoyable, useful things, why do you think, if you were to conjecture, would this system that didn't work for me, per se, work for so many people when, you know, like...
I was thinking about that. I think I know why. So from a I look at everything through the lens of biology.
Right.
You know, much to the discomfort of people close to me. But I can say that the book did a very interesting thing. I have to give him credit. What he did is he tried to bypass all the deeper biology of dopamine, acetylcholine, addiction, etc. And what he did was he said, you've got a forebrain. Your forebrain can tell itself stories. By telling itself stories, you can set context. So let's tell yourself a story. And the story is this. Withdrawal doesn't really exist. Or it exists, but, you know, nicotine...
It's not that bad.
The biology of nicotine doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
And when you feel uncomfortable, that's... In other words, he used the lack of knowledge about the way it really works in the reader to trick the reader into tricking themselves into bypassing what would potentially be a much more complicated process. Now, for some people, and apparently celebrities, it worked for them. But what if I came along with just the tiniest bit of knowledge to the contrary? Or what if someone like you has an experience to the contrary? Well then, bam, you're right back in square one. I guess it just doesn't work for me. Or there's something wrong with me.
Something wrong with me. That's what I've been feeling like. And that's sort of endemic to the method. Like, if it doesn't work, it's because you didn't follow all of the instructions, or you didn't understand part of it. Read it again, or call us, or attend a live seminar. In one edition of the book, Alan Carr writes that if you're thinking I'm still craving cigarettes after reading it, then, quote, you are being very stupid. How can you claim I want to be a non-smoker and then say I want a cigarette? That's a contradiction. If you say I want a cigarette, you're saying I want to be a smoker. Non-smokers don't want to smoke cigarettes. You already know what you really want to be, so stop punishing yourself. Having this information, knowing what nicotine was and is no longer doing to me, was comforting, because I was like, it's not in my imagination. I wish I'd known all this before I'd stopped, that I'd had more of a map of the landscape, instead of just pretending I wasn't even on the continent. This was March 31st, the day after I talked with Huberman. It's 3 months in. I've been trying to get dressed for like, I don't know, like 10 or 15 minutes. I'm like, everything's just a little bit harder since I stopped smoking. I'm like slower. I'm slower, and I'll forget. I mean, supposedly it's good for, nicotine is good for working memory. Meaning like, why did I come into the kitchen again? Oh yeah. And I've like no working memory anymore. And so it takes me forever to do simple things. And they're not as fun. That's not the word for getting dressed, but they're not, it's like, it just feels like, everything feels a little bit like a chore. Oh, goodness. There have been lots of news stories about Alan Carr's easy way. He was interviewed a ton in the UK when he was alive, and the people who took over the organization after him have done a lot of press. But looking high and low, I hadn't seen anyone question the scientific accuracy of the method, even though most of the biology Huberman talks about has been known for a little while. So either I'm missing something, which happens a lot, or nobody's ever raised this particular issue with them before. So you'll be there. I did actually.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you.
So I sat down with John Dicey, Alan Carr's successor. He's the global CEO and senior facilitator of Easy Way now. He also took the seminar himself to quit smoking. Says he was so enthralled by how well it worked that he, quote-unquote, hassled and harangued Alan Carr to let him get involved. They butted heads sometimes, but John really considers Carr to be a genius. I asked him if they'd ever talked about brain chemistry when Carr was alive. He said they had, although...
He wasn't really interested in the science side.
He wasn't?
No, I think he... neither am I, really.
Really?
I've got to say, it's one of those things... don't really think it has much to bring to the table, if that makes sense.
Because, he he would say that he was like the world's leading expert on quitting smoking.
Yes.
You're smiling as I say that. So he wouldn't like sort of, as the world's leading expert in quitting, sort of self-professed world's leading expert in quitting smoking, be necessarily curious about that stuff.
Yeah, I think he was busy doing other things.
Right.
So in terms of the Easy Way method, it's now being applied to, I think it's 15 or 16 different addictions or issues.
There's the easy way to stop drinking, the easy way, WEIGH, to lose weight. There's one about being addicted to your phone, lots of things. I should say, an updated version of the book, different from the one I read, addresses brain science for the first time, but it's very selective. And it still claims nobody's ever had any pleasure or benefit from nicotine. I started taking John Dicey through what I'd learned from Andrew Huberman, the research that contradicts what's in the book, and that might help explain why, for a lot of people, it's not going to be easy to walk away from smoking. So when the book says that it doesn't physically aid in concentration, just scientifically it does aid in concentration.
He's wrong.
You think he's wrong?
I don't think he's wrong. I know he's wrong.
He's a neurobiologist.
I don't care what he is.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm not being disrespectful.
Yeah,
to him.
no, sure.
He has a theory. His
It's
theory,
based on, it's based on
It's just wrong
tests.
on many levels. And I'm struggling to understand why there's a desperation to prove or believe that nicotine does something when it doesn't. I've never heard so much nonsense in my life. I'm sorry. You're a very nice guy, I'm sure. I'm sure he believes what he's saying, but it's absolute nonsense.
I think that's where we're misunderstanding each other. Because I'm not looking for positives of nicotine. I was just looking for what is the mechanism. I was just looking for what is the mechanism. And when I learned about the different neurochemicals that nicotine evokes in the brain, it just felt like that the method was predicated on a lie. That
So your feeling is that you'll take nicotine for the rest of your life?
No, although...
Why not?
Huh?
Why not?
Well, it wasn't my plan. It wasn't my plan because...
Why isn't your plan? Why isn't it your plan if it's giving you these tremendous benefits? You struggle without it. Why wouldn't you just take it for the rest of your life?
I think because there are health detriments. They're nothing like... Things got spicy with John Dicey.